It was summer vacation. I'm Kyle, and along with my cousin Ethan and our neighbor and friend Felix, all of us from the same small town, we were racking our brains trying to figure out where to spend the break and have the best time possible. We saw people jetting off to Europe, heard whispers of others hitting up the States or maybe even Russia, but we decided to go for an all-time record in humility. We'd go back to our hometown, the one where we were born and grew up. We convinced ourselves there's no place like home.
Support local tourism, and keeping it simple is the best luxury.
We packed what we needed, hopped into my old pickup truck, and hit the road around 3 in the afternoon. The trip started off fun, truly great. We waved goodbye to the last sign that read, "Drive safely," feeling like the city was shaking our hands, hoping we'd come back. We cruised until we reached the final gas station before the dirt road leading to our town. We filled up, grabbed some cold drinks, and set off. The road soon became draped in fog, thick and beautiful, like a bride on her wedding day. But the clouds kept getting denser, eating up the road instead of adorning it. We could barely see a thing in front of us. I slowed down so much we'd have arrived quicker if we'd walked. The strange and chilling thing was that we'd occasionally enter a pocket of absolute silence. Suddenly, every sound around us would just cut out. The wind, the engine's hum, the tires on the asphalt. Just a weird, unnerving quiet.
At first, I thought my ears were popping from the change in elevation or something. The first time, it only lasted about a minute. Then the sounds rushed back. About 15 minutes later, the silence returned. That's when I asked, "Hey guys, is it just my ears, or are you hearing that too?" One by one they replied, "I thought it was just me." We all realized we were experiencing the exact same thing. We started getting worried. The third time the sound died, it felt like the truck went weightless, as if we were floating. This time, it lasted almost 5 minutes. The guys and I kept glancing at each other, confused and anxious.
Felix cracked a nervous joke. "Dude, I think your old pickup has a ghost of a Rolls Royce living inside it." We managed a dry, shaky laugh because what we were facing wasn't normal. Things went back to normal, and the fog thinned out. Around 6:30, the road started to climb a small hill. From there, we could see our town in the distance, and the sight brought a wave of relief after all the tension. After the hill, the road dipped on into something like a valley, and our town was right on the other side. As soon as we reached the valley entrance, the thick fog slammed back, and the terrifying silence returned abruptly. This time, the silence lasted a long time, until we were about halfway through the valley. Then, everything snapped back to normal. We were only half a mile from the town entrance when the heavy silence returned yet again. We entered the town, the silence still smothering, the anxiety and dread doubling in our chests. It was as if everything around us had been switched off. No birds chirping, no dogs barking, not even the faint sounds of kids playing. The layout of the alleys felt familiar, but the details were all wrong. The windows were tiny, the doors were wider than usual, and some of the houses looked as if they were painted with a black, shimmering shadow in the twilight. I pulled the truck over. We passed 4 men standing in front of a house. I gave a quick, "Hey." One of them replied with a cold nod. The others didn't move, like statues made of flesh. We asked for the town, Little Creek. He pointed vaguely down the road without a word. We walked on, our steps heavy, each of us trying to convince himself that this was just a trick of the fog and exhaustion. But this wasn't the town we knew, the one we'd visited dozens of times. The small streets and entrances were the same, but the houses were different. We didn't see any of the small shops. The people were strange.
They wouldn't look at us, walking with a bizarre gait, one foot on the ground, the other seemingly floating in the air. We felt like we'd walked into a parallel dimension or a time portal. We reached a square, usually the spot for a small market with Joe's Grocery and a bakery, where people would gather. But what we saw, people standing in long lines, each holding a weird item, a black stone, a dried tree stump, or a ragged piece of cloth. Their faces were pale, their eyes fixed on the sky as if awaiting a command. Ethan whispered, "Guys, I can't breathe right. This isn't our town." Felix grabbed my shoulder and urged, "Don't panic. Let's get back to the truck." We hurried back. We opened the doors, jumped in, and I turned the key. But nothing. No engine noise, no click. Not even the fuel light came on. The truck was a dead piece of metal. Suddenly, we heard heavy footsteps approaching. We turned around to see all the people from the square walking slowly toward us, with that same strange gait, one foot grounded, one airborne. One man stepped closer, his face devoid of clear features, just white, pupilless eyes. He leaned in and spoke a word we didn't understand, a word that echoed, hitting all three of us in the head simultaneously. "You are late." I yelled, "Start the car, Kyle! Start it!" But the engine remained silent. Felix tried to open his door. It was locked solid. We froze. Ethan, Felix, and I exchanged looks of terror, but the man with the blank face and wide eyes just gave a cold smile. He opened the front door of the truck without touching it and said in a voice that seemed to rumble out of the valley walls, "Come. Don't keep the bride waiting." Ethan got out first, his face ghost white. Felix and I followed. The truck doors closed silently behind us. We walked behind the man with heavy steps. The air felt thick, as if we were walking underwater. He led us to a large house, bigger than any we remembered in the town. Its walls were of dark clay, but they shimmered like metal. At the entrance, women with long black scarves covering their faces were handing out something in clay bowls. Each of us was given a bowl. One of the women said in a husky voice, "Drink for the blessing." I lifted the bowl to my mouth. The smell was like wet earth mixed with blood. I only pretended to drink. Felix shuddered and threw his bowl to the ground, but it made no sound when it shattered. We entered a long hall filled with rows of men, all with the same look, blank white faces, empty eyes, and thin bodies dressed in shimmering white clothes. At the head of the room sat the groom, an extremely tall young man, his head nearly touching the ceiling, wearing a black mask painted with a wide smile. Next to him was a tiny woman, almost disappearing inside her red dress, her hair covering her face completely. The man who invited us stood and announced, "These are our guests from the other town. They have finally arrived." The attendees clapped a single thunderous applause, like a clap of thunder inside the house. Huge covered plates were placed in front of us. When they were unveiled, there was no meat or chicken, just strange food we couldn't recognize. Felix started shaking uncontrollably, looking like he was about to collapse. I was frozen stiff. The groom pointed his long hand at us and said in a deep, booming voice, "The guest eats first." All the faces turned toward us, waiting. We instinctively hesitated, unable to reach for the food. Ethan moved closer to the dish, and as he did, the terrifying silence we'd experienced on the road descended again. No sound of breathing, no heartbeat. Nothing, just the silence that swallows you whole. But this time,
The sound didn't return. The whole world remained still, and the faces in front of us started to fade like rising mist. I grabbed Felix's arm and screamed, "Run!"
We bolted toward the door, but it had vanished. The walls all became a moving black fog, and the sounds returned, but not normal ones. Screams of men and women, mixing crying with maniacal laughter. We ran through the strange town streets, searching for any sign of the truck or a way out. The alleys were the ones we knew, but the houses all looked exactly the same, like carbon copies, every door identical, every window a smudge of blackness. Ethan gasped, "Guys, we're going in circles. This is the same spot we passed a minute ago." Indeed, every street we turned down led us back to that cursed market square. The people who had been standing there with rocks and wood were gone. Ethan raised his hand to look at his watch. He said, shaking, "Impossible. It was 7 a minute ago. The hands are stuck at 6:33. They won't move." We all checked our phones. Full battery, but the screens were all frozen at the same time. 6:33 p.m. It was as if time had stopped the moment we entered the town. We remembered what the first man at the town entrance had said. "You are late." I told them, "Maybe the escape is where we came in. Let's get back to the valley." We ran toward the road we had taken, but the valley now looked much deeper than before, like an abyss. The fog rose from it like a thick vapor, and a sound of screaming came from its depths. We couldn't see an exit or a road leading into the valley, only seeing it from a distance. Felix slumped to the ground. "We're trapped. There's no way out of here." We stood in the middle of the road, defeated. The people of this town began to surround us from all directions, the strange figures slowly closing in with their floating steps. One of them declared, "You will not leave unless you complete the wedding." As the monstrous voices echoed, "You will not leave unless you complete the wedding." Suddenly, a sound cut through the air, a loud, clear, resonating bell chime. It was piercing, shaking our hearts and the ground beneath our feet. The strange people froze. It was as if time had stopped a second time. But this wasn't the smothering silence. It was a profound, reverent stillness, as if they were all waiting for something. Even the shadows that had been lurking dissolved into the air. The car appears. We turned around in fear, and there was the pickup truck, standing right behind us, bathed in a strange glow as if it had never left our world. Ethan shouted, "The truck! Hurry!" We ran with all our might. Felix stumbled twice but scrambled back up. With every step, it felt like the ground was trying to hold us back, heavy, but it couldn't stop us. The escape. We tore open the doors and jumped in. The moment I touched the key, the engine started on its own. The chime continued to ring out, getting louder and louder. The strange people were no longer moving. Their faces turned skyward, as if they were melting into the air. I slammed the gas pedal and we took off. The truck tore through the fog at an unnatural speed, and within seconds,
we found ourselves on the usual road leading to our town. The strange thing was, the chime could still be heard, faintly, in the distance, even though we were far away. The real town. Finally, we entered the town we knew. The shops were there, children were laughing, and people were greeting us with familiar faces. Everything was normal. But when we pulled up in front of my grandfather's house, we discovered that the clock in the truck was still stuck at 6:33. Not a minute had passed. Not a second had moved. Ethan whispered, shaking, "So, are we out? Or are we still trapped in their world?"